Okay, I am not one to punish people for showing up on time. So it looks like everyone's showing up on time, and it also looks like we're having transcribing done today. So I'm happy. Hopefully it comes up correct. So if someone is hearing impaired and something doesn't come up correctly, I apologize. Hello, everybody. My name is Dan Timins. I'm a trust and estates and elder law attorney. Many of you know me. I am hoping that we're able to go through a relatively difficult topic today. I'm going to be starting up in about 15 seconds. If anyone has any questions today, I want you to go to the Zoom bar, which you will see at the bottom of your screen, or maybe the top, and go to the Q&A section. I'm going to be attempting to answer questions along the way. So we're going to be starting in about 15 seconds. Thank you. All right. Well, I think we've waited long enough. That is 15 seconds, maybe even 20 seconds. So again, if people have questions, I'm going to ask them along the way. We'll also have some time afterward to answer those questions. If anyone has any questions, please ask. Don't be embarrassed or shy. So let's begin today's presentation. We have so many Medicaid trusts. And the truth is there are a lot of confusing topics that are going over today. Unlike our last presentation webinar, which was kind of a marathon, this is a little bit of a prolonged sprint. So I just want people to be ready. There is information here that you may need to re-listen to. This should hopefully be up on the website by the end of today, if not by tomorrow morning. Take your time. There's a lot going on here. You have to be able to think about today's conversation in 4 dimensions. Not everything is going to fit in perfectly like, a puzzle piece. So let's begin. First of all, I think it's important that I show you my disclaimer. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Today is primarily a New York-based program. For all of my clients who may be living in New Jersey or Connecticut, you'll get yours in your next program. Don't worry, we're going to make yours a special day. We're all going to be speaking about the Northeast states that got COVID right, finally, and all of our other brethren in other states, they can learn their lessons. So here's the disclaimer. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Here is today's table of contents. I did not put page numbers, but I think for an hour-long presentation, we do not need it. There are really 5 concepts we're going to be going over today, or 5 sections. For a change, I am going to be including a key icon. See that cute little key over there? That is a key concept page, one that if you're going to spend time trying to figure something out, I want you to figure those pages out in particular. All right, so let's begin. First, Chapter 1, 3 crucial points. Everyone knows I like to have crucial points in my webinar that kind of give you some background as to what we're going to be talking about. So again, if you want to be present for any moment of this conversation, this is it. Point number 1. These are the so many types of Medicaid trusts we're going to be talking about today. There are only 4, so you think, oh, maybe it's not so bad. Believe me, some of them are as different as night and day. Their primary purpose that they share in common is that they're trying to help you qualify for Medicaid benefits. They are different. Income-only trusts are sometimes referred to as Medicaid asset protection trusts. That's the term that I use because I feel as though the client needs to see the benefit. We're protecting your asset. But the law says because income can be distributed to the person who creates the trust, they call them income-only trusts. I think that that title confuses their concept. Pooled income trusts are dealing with excess income. That's why I like referring to them as pooled income trusts. You may have heard of them as being called pooled trust. We'll explain why they get that term as well. And then we have first-party supplemental needs trusts and third-party supplemental needs trusts. I will tell you now the big secret. A first-party trust has money that is created by the person who wants to get on Medicaid. So if I worked hard for 15 years of my life and then I had a car accident and now I have $100,000 in my brokerage account, that is my money. That goes into a first-party supplemental needs trust because it's my money being put in a trust for my benefit. If my mother feels bad for me, she can take her $200,000 and place it in a third-party trust because the third party is her giving her money to me. That's the biggest difference to understand between the two of those, and we'll go over that again. Point number two, we're talking about income and assets today, and the fact that income is not assets. And I have a lot of singular versus plural references through here that may not make sense. You know, I refer to assets sometimes in the singular, sometimes in the plural. That doesn't make sense. It has an S at the end of it. Income, usually you refer to it in the singular, but it's ongoing, so is it plural? Who knows? So please, for the grammar police, maybe this is your chance to take a break. Take a vacation today, guys. Take a sick day. We're talking both about income and assets today. And again, just to remember the difference between the two, you're not really much in control of income, right? It just kind of comes in. You can't say, I want more income. I want to give it to this person. You can't say, once I receive it, I'll give it to a pooled income trust. But you know, you can complain with your boss that you want to raise all day long. Doesn't mean you're going to get it. Assets, on the other hand, are the things that you have in your pocket. You can change them from cash to checking to Bitcoin to mutual funds to, you know, levers or some other type of device. So assets can be freely exchanged, and you can give them to other individuals or trusts that you create now because you have it in your pocket. You will see that assets are the bigger focus of today, because assets are what is going to be going into the majority of these trusts we're discussing to fund them. Most planning up front is done with assets, which brings us to our next point, which is the two phases we are speaking about today. There is a Medicaid planning phase, and then there's the application phase, which I call the implementation phase. I don't want that term to be misunderstood, but we hopefully have some time in between the two. So planning is when I maybe get diagnosed with dementia when I'm 78 years old, and I'm still relatively young. You know, you're not old in my world till you're 90. Maybe you're too old to date me, but I'm married anyway. It doesn't matter. So at 78, you may say, well, this could turn bad in the next 5, 6, 10 years. So you have an opportunity to plan up front. Sometimes just some issue happens and you have to implement immediately. Or maybe that time does come 5, 6, 8 years later, and then you would actually submit the application at that point. So hopefully people have a planning phase, and sometimes, again, ideally, the implementation phase when they actually, you know, give up their control and get onto Medicaid happens several years in the future. Of course, this doesn't always happen. I have clients who have strokes. Strokes and aneurysms are the bad ones because you usually can't plan for those, right? They just kind of happen. You may have a propensity to have another stroke, but usually that first stroke hits you unexpectedly. Or car accidents. Car accidents, great example of something bad because you didn't get a chance to have any time between the planning phase and the implementation phase. So keep that in mind. Ideally, those phases are different points in time, but not always. And who are we talking about today? So those are the critical points that you need to understand going into this conversation. But then the question is, well, why am I here on this webinar? Who do I care about? Why are we here today? It's to talk about who gets to take advantage of Medicaid benefits. Here are the 3 categories, and I challenge you to find another category where Medicaid makes sense. This is for disabled individuals. And again, the term disabled is perhaps a little tone deaf. You know, I've been known to be a little tone deaf. It's not intentional. I'm old. I'm born in another generation. But the term that is typically used is disabled individuals. And if you think I'm tone deaf, the court still refers to certain people as retarded. Go figure that in 2020. The 3 parties are typically children. And when I say children, it doesn't need to be your children. It's just people who are born disabled. Now, someone who has some type of on the spectrum of autism or cerebral palsy, one of these illnesses that just happened the moment you were born, or at least it manifests itself pretty early. So it's people who are born disabled, people who were not born disabled, but have become disabled. You know, great example of that is someone, again, who's in an accident or strokes. People who have severe multiple sclerosis, so they're not disabled now, but as their illness gets worse, they may become, or lupus. And then people who are not disabled, but may become disabled. You know, everyone makes fun of grandma and grandpa because they forget where they put their keys. They may have dementia, but that doesn't necessarily mean they are disabled. They still may lead a perfectly decent life for several years. Same thing with people with Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. So again, the idea here is these people are people who may become disabled, but may not. And again, we are also talking about potentially people who are disabled now, but may no longer be disabled at some point in the future. I have a hand raised from somebody. I would like you to use the Q&A section, please. I'm not going to be doing voiceovers today, so please use the Q&A tab in your tab underneath on the Zoom bar. And Medicaid may be used for people who are disabled but will no longer be, but it can be tricky because anything that Medicaid pays for your care, you may have to pay it back to them. Now, if it's standard home care, like let's say I've been staying at my home the last, several years, let's say I'm 65, anything Medicaid has paid me from 55 to 65, I may have to pay back. Anything before then, typically not. The sole exception is if I ended up in a nursing home, like again, an aneurysm, and I was 45 years old, I do have to pay back Medicaid for that. So again, people who get better after being on Medicaid, it's a little tricky. You have to ask, how long is this person going to be disabled? If it's only going to be a few months, you may not want to go down that road. Now let's talk really quickly, again, to get it out of the way, entitlement versus needs-based programs. The government provides two different types of programs. Number one is a program that you have paid into and you are entitled to. The other is one that you get because you didn't necessarily buy into it. You're just entitled to it because you have a specific need and you are a U.S. individual. So again, I shouldn't say you're entitled to needs-based programs, but I'm saying certain conditions will mean you have the need that you can qualify for them. Entitlement programs, like I said, are ones that you've already paid into. If you've been working during your life, you look at your paycheck and you say, hey, here's a federal income tax being taken out and a state income tax. And if you're in New York City, maybe a New York City income tax. And they say, hey, here's another tax. And it's called OASDI. It basically is you paying for Medicare and Social Security. And you're paying 15.3%. Typically, you pay half and your employer pays the other half, unless you're self-employed. And then you're paying a decent amount of money in there. There's eventually a cutoff. If you make enough income, you're going to not have to pay that full 15.3%. But that's beyond the scope of today, because these are entitlement programs, and our discussion is based more toward needs-based programs. Now, the idea here is that Medicare, you're entitled to it. You're paying for Part A out of your paycheck now. And then when you qualify, I shouldn't say when you're 65, when you qualify, you have to pay for Part B at that time. So Medicare is kind of like health insurance, right? And if you're disabled before you reach full retirement age, which is around 66, the age continues to go up just a little bit depending on how old you are, you become entitled to Social Security disability income if you aren't at full retirement age. You have to work 40 quarters and pay into these programs for 40 quarters for you to be qualified to receive these benefits, to be entitled to them. Then there are needs-based programs. You're as entitled to Medicaid as you're entitled to fly on that fighter jet that your tax dollars paid for that's on the USS Ronald Reagan right now. You're just not. That's the answer. Needs-based programs are not entitlement programs. They must be used by people who are indigent, meaning they have no money. Well, if you have no money, you don't need Uncle Dan to set up your Medicaid application or these trusts. You just qualify. So you come to an attorney to make it look like you are indigent. And you can talk to me about, hey, that's a scam. Believe me, your neighbors are doing it. It's not a scam. My competitors are doing it. So needs-based programs, if you have assets and income, are still available to you. You just have to plan. You have to have a physical and mental need, but more importantly, the term needs-based is because you have a financial need as well. You can't afford to pay for these things, your healthcare or your living expenses. They are means tested. And these programs are SSI, which is the cash equivalent of Medicaid. So in other words, kind of like Social Security disability, but if you've paid in less than 40 quarters. And then Medicare instead is Medicaid. And the two programs are not the same for a number of reasons. But again, these are programs that you only qualify for if you have the financial need. Restrictions do apply. So if you have too much money, you need to work with someone like me to set up trusts, which is what we're here to talk about today. So this is a chart that I want people, if they so care to go back to after this presentation. I gave a few of these. I should have put a little key on this chart. But basically, for those of you who retire, you're going to get Social Security retirement. If you qualify for that because you paid in 40 quarters, but you get disabled before this age, you qualify for Social Security disability, SSDI. If you did not, like you're a person who was born disabled, you qualify for supplemental security income. This is Social Security Disability Light. It has restrictions attached to it. Again, somewhat beyond the scope of this presentation. I have it in future slides coming up in just a few moments, but I want you to go back to this at some later date. And more importantly, if these things apply to you, wait for another Daniel Timins webinar. I look forward to speaking to you about SSDI and SSI and the differences there. For the time being, let's just remind everybody that Social Security disability has two different components. The one you're entitled to because you paid into it for 40 quarters, that's the SSDI. And the other is one you never paid into for a full 40 quarters. I could have had, well, maybe not me physically, but let's say my wife could have had a child and she only paid into Social Security for 25 months of her life, and then she gets disabled. She does not qualify for SSDI. She did not pay in for 40 quarters. She would most likely qualify for SSI if she had limited funds. Now, again, Social Security programs give you money. That's the idea. Medicare, Medicaid, healthcare, and personal care. But Social Security is money. Some people would say free money. That's not true. You paid into it. And even if you didn't pay into it, it's not free. I got news for you. Someone has to pay for it. SSDI, again, is full disability. Here's a great example. We're not talking about SSDI today. I just put this chart here so you can, when you're looking at this webinar a little bit later, put it on pause and kind of read it. You are entitled to make a little bit of money, but still be considered to be disabled. But the important thing is if you are disabled before your full retirement age, there are minimal constraints. You can have $10 billion in your checking account. That would be crazy, but you could. You can still qualify for different types of medical care. The only important thing here is that you can be on SSDI, which is an entitlement program, but also qualify for Medicaid. If you've paid into SSDI or, Social Security, you may be disabled and you may be collecting benefits. But if you don't have a lot of assets or income, you may still qualify for Medicaid. And in fact, believe it or not, for people who have full Social Security when they retire, most of the people I work with qualify for Social Security retirement and SSDI, and yet still do have Medicaid. That's why you're here, because you have too much money to qualify on your own. You need me to help you figure out how you can qualify for these benefits. But again, SSDI is a little bit beyond today's discussion. SSI is an entitlement program. Again, it pays money. And like I said, we're going to need to spend a little bit of time on another webinar to go over the caveats as to SSI, but it's paying the disabled individual money, even though they've worked less than 40 quarters. They are not entitled to this. This is a needs-based program. And you see the maximum benefit in New York is $870 because it's partially federal and then the state kicks in a little bit. But remember, you have to use some of this money. The government can tell you how to use some of this money. You have to use it on food and housing. Now, the limitation here is that you're only entitled to have $2,000 in your assets. So your bank account or brokerage accounts, et cetera, et cetera. It's a pretty small amount, right? I mean, even people who live paycheck to paycheck may have $2,000 in the bank account, even if it's only for a mere few hours. So again, not easy to qualify for SSI. Again, if you qualify for SSI, and that's again, disability light payments, you automatically qualify for Medicaid because you have a small amount of assets, a small amount of income, and you're technically disabled. So you automatically qualify for Medicaid because SSI has the most strict requirements to qualify. So it's kind of like, if you qualify to enter a running race, you could qualify to enter a walking race, right? So you automatically qualify for Medicaid if you get SSI. There's Medicare, which again, we're somewhat familiar with. You are entitled to Medicare if you pay in for 40 quarters. So not a needs-based program. I can get Medicaid or Medicare, and I don't need to have any of these trusts necessarily. And again, there's two types that we're concerned about. I know there's Part A, B, C, and D. We're just talking about A and B today. Part A is your inpatient hospital care. What is being taken out of your paycheck while you are working is for Part A. Now, Part A, and here comes the big shocker for a lot of people I meet with, they think Part A covers them indefinitely in the nursing home. I'm not saying you do, but many people do. And that would be wrong, wrong, wrong. if you need rehabilitation, so you're older, let's say you're 88 and you fall and you break your hip and you need to go to the rehabilitation center, that's the nursing home. It's a nursing home and rehab center. You're only guaranteed to be covered by Medicare for 20 days. Now, there's a possibility you may get an additional 80 days if you're improving. You must show progress. And I'm seeing this more and more where the government is saying, nope, you're not getting better. Sorry, after 20 days, once that 20 day comes around, they prepare a notice and they send it to you. And they say, guess what? We're not going to cover you anymore. The other thing is that Part A of Medicare does not cover home health aides. The government isn't going to pay under Medicare to send someone to your house and help you with your needs. They do have limited short-term nursing services after you've been to a hospital, but don't rely on that. A nurse isn't the one who's going to help you, change your clothing or get into the shower, et cetera, et cetera. They're going to be there, for example, to give you a shot. Now, Part B is the component that you pay for. It's for doctor's visits and procedures, and you pay for that when you're receiving your Social Security benefits. So if you're on SSDI, you don't have to be 65. You could be disabled for 29 months, or you could be at full retirement age. They're going to take money out under Medicare Part B. That gets automatically deducted. And the cruddy thing is you don't know how much you're going to have to pay in that until it's too late because they change the amount. Look, it's almost up to $500 per month for people who have a high amount of income. Which brings us then to our next key concept, which is what is Medicaid? And we're going to be spending just a few moments doing this because this is why you're here, right? So Medicaid is a healthcare, and I should have added, and personal care program, as you will see, but it's not a cash program. That's why I put it that way. It's not like Social Security that assists low-income and asset families or individuals. It helps pay for their long-term medical and custodial care needs. It is a joint program that's funded primarily by the federal government, and it's run at the state and county level, where different coverages, exemptions, and costs vary. Now, that's kind of a mouthful. So what do we mean? Well, let's go to our next slide and find out. What is Medicaid exactly? It pays for personal care. So it pays for if you have trouble transferring, walking from your bed to your living room, for example. If you have trouble bathing or dressing yourself, sometimes you're not able to feed yourself. It helps you with eating or continence or toileting. So these are the things we take advantage of, we have the ability to do every day. But when you can't do these things, you're either going to have a family member do it who may not be qualified, or hopefully you have a home health aide, or you're in a nursing home. I'm not saying hopefully for that. This is what Medicaid does. It pays for someone who can help you with these care items. Now, it does also pay for any copays or deductibles that you have for Medicare Part A. But you still have to pay out of Social Security for your Medicare Part B. Remember I said when you're disabled or you reach 65, you get Medicare Part B automatically deducted from that Social Security payment. You still have to pay that. So the fact that you're receiving Medicaid benefits doesn't matter. You still got to pay for Medicare. And frankly, you do, because you tend to get better care from doctors with Medicare than Medicaid. I mean, Medicare probably pays doctors like 60 cents on the dollar. Medicaid probably pays them somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 cents on the dollar. Don't quote me on those figures, but you get the idea. You're going to be able to qualify for more medical providers because more accept the Medicare than Medicaid. Now, again, we're talking about differences between needs-based and entitlement-based programs. We did that for Social Security. Let's just look really quickly. Medicaid is that needs-based program. You need to have a limited amount of assets. I refer to them as resources as well. Medicare, just look, as long as you qualify, there are no limits as to what money you can have, how much money your spouse has. When you qualify for Medicare, you're entitled to it. Look really quickly at the Medicaid side on the left. You're only allowed to have $15,750 in assets. There are some exceptions there. Watch another webinar. Retirement plans are accepted, et cetera, and a few other things, not on this webinar. And then your income is limited to $875 a month. Now, again, we're not talking so much about spouses today. That's the next category. If you're married and you're receiving Medicaid, we're not going to impoverish your spouse as well, but you see the amount of assets and income he or she can have is pretty low. So we use Medicaid trust to help not just the ill spouse, but sometimes the healthy spouse. So again, your resources can't be substantial if you want to qualify. If you have too many resources, you're going to transfer them. You're going to give them to a family member or ding ding to a Medicaid trust. Because then if it's a Medicaid trust, you can qualify for Medicaid at some point. Now, in New York, if you transfer that house or the excess brokerage assets this month, here we are in July, in August, you could send in a Medicaid application and conceivably receive home care benefits. Yes, they may send a home health aide to your house to take care of you if you're disabled. Well, if you don't transfer those assets until October 1st, starting on October 1st, that 1 month, what we term a look back period, is going to turn into 30 months. I have been telling clients now for the last several webinars, this is your chance to do Medicaid planning. You don't need to turn in the application now, but you do need to transfer the assets now if you want to qualify for that 1 month look back. So if you transfer those excess assets to a Medicaid trust in this month or next month or even in September, and then you decide I want to put in my Medicaid application in January of next year, you're fine. It's not when you place the application into Medicaid, it's when you transfer the assets out of your name. I want to make that clear. So this is it. The spaceship's about to take off. It's now or never. And again, the nursing home says if you have too much money and you transfer assets, you need to wait 5 years before you can qualify for Medicaid. So if I have more than this $15,750 in my name, I have to have transferred that extra, let's say $200,000 5 years ago or more in order for me to qualify. We have someone who's asking a comment. They are asking on the chat, not the Q&A, but I'm pretty lenient. Here is, what is a refusal and how can a refusal of an inheritance be protected for a beneficiary? I'm glad you asked. Guess what, Irene C? We're going to be going over that today. That's one of the trusts specifically. That's going to be called a supplemental needs trust, which, now that we're speaking about it, let's get closer to that. Last things first, or I should say next things next, is going to be income taxation of trusts. This is the final topic we're going to cover before we delve right in. I know it's a lot of background, but I want you to understand what's going on here before you decide, hey, I want to do a Medicaid trust. This is how taxation works for you and me both. And this is just federal taxes. So this is not New York state taxes or New York City taxes. If you're in Florida, congratulations. You just have to deal with these taxes and then you see how much you have to pay and you say, oh, still doesn't look so good to be in Florida. Try being up here. But guess what? We don't have coronavirus anymore up here. That's my feeling. So you guys messed it all up down there. This is how much an individual on the left-hand side has to pay income taxes at their specific brackets. So if you only make $10,000, and I shouldn't say only, but if you make $10,000, you're paying 10% on that first approximately $9,875, and then you pay 12% on the next $125. So, that's pretty lenient. You only hit the highest tax bracket when you are making as a single individual, $518,400. So you can make over $500,000 before you hit the highest tax bracket of 37% for income tax purposes. All right. You and I, we're working, make $500,000. We still haven't hit the 37% bracket. Well, if you give this to a trust, that's an irrevocable trust, not a revocable trust, an irrevocable trust like Medicaid trusts, you hit that 37% tax bracket when that trust earns $12,950. And people say, what, wait, I must be missing something. That seems ridiculous because look at the bottom, I'm going to take you back. Bottom left-hand corner, you hit the 37% tax bracket and $518,000 and change. That's a lot of money you can make before you hit the 37% tax bracket. And then you see here an irrevocable trust. What? It's only, at $13,000, I'm already paying at the 37% income tax bracket. And the answer is yes, you are, because that's just how it works. Now, the good news is this. There is a tax caveat for irrevocable trusts that is essential to understand. There's no double taxation for irrevocable trust income. It either gets paid at the trust level or, and we can do this with Medicaid trusts in some circumstances, the income tax instead is transferred to the recipient because the money is given to them. So if I have a trust that is an income-only trust, which we'll go over in a moment, and it says the trust can either hold on to the income or the income can go to the beneficiary. If we give that income to the beneficiary, they're paying at that lower personal income tax rate. What do I mean? Here's an example just to illustrate. So let's say I'm a disabled individual or an older individual. I don't need to be disabled. Let's say I'm making Social Security and I have a pension, et cetera, and I'm earning $30,000 a year. And my trust that's an irrevocable trust earns $30,000 as well. Now, the first example here, I'm going to actually pull out, my cursor or what have you, my mouse icon over here. If the irrevocable trust holds onto all of that income, this is what the income tax looks like. The beneficiary, me, I made $30,000. So I pay income taxes of $3,730. And that's an approximate, and that's just federal, not including state or city. The trust pays $9,300 in taxes because we left it in the trust, and the trust has those horrible income tax rates. If, however, that $30,000 was transferred from the irrevocable trust to me, all right, my personal income tax went up substantially, all right? So I went up, $5,500, but the trust owes no income taxes now. So there's no double taxation. Either gets taxed at the irrevocable trust level, or that income is generated and given to me, and then I, as an individual, pay the income taxes. So keep that in mind. If we distribute income from an irrevocable trust to a beneficiary, the tax rate is lower. Thank you for sticking with me up to this point. So I promise you we talk about the many types of Medicaid trusts. We finally reached there. But I think that background is important because it will illustrate this conversation for you in the decisions that you would like to make. There are 4 different types of Medicaid trusts. There is the income-only trust, which again, I will refer to as Medicaid asset protection trusts. Some people just call these Medicaid trusts, but I don't think that's helpful. There are pooled income trusts. Again, they don't protect the assets, they are spending the income. And then there are 2 types of supplemental needs trusts, which we've already discussed. Third-party trust is a trust that's created with someone's money who is not the beneficiary. So if I'm disabled, my mom creates that third-party trust. If, however, I'm disabled and I had money and I need to qualify for Medicaid, I can create my own first-party supplemental needs trusts. So let's go into really quickly how trusts are created and who tends to do these. So a trust can either be created by your will. We call your will your last will and testament. And those trusts are called testamentary trusts, right? Because they're by your last will and testament. They're only created when you die. They're not around while you're alive. So they don't do, if I have a testamentary trust in my will, it doesn't do me any benefit because my will kind of sits there and does nothing until I die. So the only time that a will is going to create a trust for Medicaid purposes is when it creates a trust for somebody else. I'm dead. Why am I going to create a trust for me when I'm dead? Doesn't make sense. So that is a third-party supplemental needs trust. I create a trust for my disabled nephew in my will. That's a testamentary trust. Only applies to third-party supplemental needs trusts. There are inter vivos trusts. Those are separate trust documents that I have drafted with an attorney, or in my case, I draft them. My clients come to me for them during their lives. It's not a part of your will because your will doesn't do anything till you die. So an inter vivos trust covers many of the other trusts. When I say many, specifically, it creates income-only trust and a first-party supplemental needs trust. And if you didn't want to put it in your will, you create a third-party supplemental needs trust as a separate document as well. So a third-party trust is the only type of trust created in your will is a third-party trust, but you could have a third-party supplemental needs trust as a separate document as well. And those are not a part of your will. Those are separate documents. We call them inter vivos because they're created during your life. Last but not least are pooled trusts. You don't create a pooled trust. Some not-for-profit does, all right? So we're going to talk about them because, again, you have to talk about these in 4 dimensions. Pooled trusts are just created by a not-for-profit organization, you have no say in what is in the trust. You just get to choose which pooled trust company you're going to end up using. All right. And those are only created during your life. When you die, any money in that trust disappears, as you will see. Keep in mind, I think we've already discussed this, most Medicaid trusts are irrevocable. Now, if I create a trust for my nephew, let's say that third-party supplemental needs trust, because my nephew has autism, I can conceivably change my will whenever I want, as long as I am still compos mentis, all right? If I lose my ability to make decisions, that will gets locked in place. But I can change my will whenever the heck I want. So a testamentary trust I create for my disabled nephew, easy to change. I can also allow a trustee after I die to break that trust. So there are provisions where I can say my nephew, he could get better. His autism isn't bad. Or I could say, well, his cerebral palsy, he may still live a perfectly happy life without any problems, have a job, et cetera, et cetera. If that's the case, I may want to say, the trustee has the right to bust the trust I have created for him. Now, he can't do that, but maybe a disinterested trustee can. So that's the good news. Not every trust is irrevocable, but any Medicaid trust I create for me to qualify for Medicaid. So I'm the one now who has excess money, and I'm trying to qualify for Medicaid and protect my money for my children, for example. That's going to be irrevocable. I can't break that. It is possible my children, if I create a Medicaid trust, they could all agree to break it. But again, it requires kind of a very detailed process. Here's a key concept, the next two slides. So listen, put down your coffee, and I want you to look at the screen. This is when a party will create a specific type of trust. This is really why I came here today. What trust applies to me? The first is these income-only trusts, the ones I refer to as Medicaid asset protection trusts. This is when I'm creating a trust with money I have some time. So maybe I was just diagnosed with dementia, or I have a family history of Parkinson's. I'm worried it's going to hit me at some point. And I say, I want to protect my assets for a future generation. I am willing to only have access to the income. That's why it's called an income-only trust. I want to protect the asset for my kids. So that's why I say the example is mom and dad. I usually say mom because dad's probably dead at this point. Sorry, guys, I got bad news for you. Typically, if you're married in an opposite sex relationship, like 7 out of 8 times, you're going to go first. Not always the case, but it's often what happens. So mom says, I'm leaving the house to the kids. I'm going to place in this Medicaid trust, and I have some excess assets. I don't need the assets. I just want the income. That's the person who's creating these income-only trusts, these Medicaid asset protection trusts. So this is typically done in the planning phase. I'm doing it up front. Well, the pooled income trust tends to be created when it's time for me to qualify for Medicaid. Why? Because I have too much income. I will never create a pooled trust and pooled income trust before I am disabled and on Medicaid. Why? Because there's no reason. I can't transfer my income to other people, right? So whereas with the assets that I have, I can transfer those to a Medicaid asset protection trust. The pooled income trust is only for when I'm finally ready to apply for Medicaid and I have too much income. So keep that in mind. Mom may create the income-only trust, the asset protection trust up front during the planning phase, and then during implementation, several years hopefully later, the pooled income trust will be created at that time and take her excess income. For first-party supplemental needs trusts, again, I don't have much of a planning phase. So whereas my mom says, she may be diagnosed with dementia and she probably has another 7 or 8 good years, she's going to plan now. Let's say I get into an accident. Me, this is Dan here. I get into an accident. I'm 45 or I don't even know how old I am. I'm older than 45. So at that point, I get into an accident. I have too much assets and I have no planning time, right? I just got injured and I just want to get on Medicaid. In that case, I may create a first-party supplemental needs trust. This is a trust that's created with my assets for me, and I want access to it now. I don't have time to wait. That's going to be a first-party supplemental needs trust. It's my money. I'm the one getting Medicaid benefits, and I need to create it now because there's no planning time that's involved. A third-party supplemental needs trust doesn't have anything to do with my money. So far we were talking about mom protecting her money for future generations. That's the income-only trust. She has too much income. She's going to get onto the pooled income trust when she gets Medicaid benefits. I get injured and I need the money now. I don't have time for any planning phase. I get onto and create a first-party supplemental needs trust. But now let's say, again, my mom feels bad for me because Dan is disabled. She can use her money to create a supplemental needs trust. And what that does is it leaves her money for my benefit, but it doesn't go directly to me. If your disabled individual, either your parent or you or your child or your family member or your best friend, if they have one of these trusts and it fits the correct situation, they should be able to qualify for Medicaid, even if they have millions of dollars in these trusts. I know, Medicaid, you're only allowed to have access to $15,750. Guess why you create this trust? Because you're not indigent and you need to look indigent. And if you get the money in your pocket, you're not going to be indigent. Well, the trust will help you qualify for Medicaid. Let's start going over each of these trusts in the specifics. The first is that one that I have called the Medicaid Asset Protection Trust, but this is the income-only trust. This is the trust your parent is creating for you because they worked hard their whole life. They want to place the house in there because they're scared the house is going to go to the nursing home if they go to a nursing home and they have bills, etc. So this is how, frankly, older generations protect their money for their kids. This is best done in the planning phase. This chart shows you each of the three parties, and this changes trust to trust. The creating individual tends to be your parents, mom and dad. All right, they're the ones who are protecting their money so they can get onto Medicaid in the future. They are the future Medicaid recipient or recipients. The trustee cannot be them. If this trust is created and the creator has children, usually the trustee is the children or a child. It can be another family member. But the idea is that your mom and dad are not going to be the trustee. They can't be in control. They've divested themselves of adequate control that the government says, no problem, you can now qualify for Medicaid. Now, again, the beneficiary during your parent's life is still your parents, but only for the income. Remember how I said this is called an income-only trust? I like calling it a Medicaid Asset Protection Trust because parents aren't really doing this so they have access to the income, right? They're doing it to protect the asset for their children. So the future beneficiary gets the assets that's left over upon the parent's passing. Now, the general features are this. First thing is the trust only allows for the distribution of income to your parents, the creator. That's why I call it the Asset Protection Trust, because it's protecting the assets for a future generation. Now, children can be, and when I say children, I mean the future generation, but you know, if you have nieces and nephews, you're probably not going to create this trust, right? It's only, you've suffered hard for your life. If you're a parent, your suffering isn't done yet until you die. But if you're an aunt or uncle, you kind of got the easy way out. You're probably not going to create this trust. Anyway, so it's usually going to be the principal going to child or children or grandchildren. Who usually uses them? Again, I think we made this clear. It's an aging individual who may get disabled or is recently diagnosed with a progressive illness. So hopefully we have somewhat of a planning phase. For home care, again, we only need 1 month, but that's going to go to 30 months starting October 1st. So keep that in mind. Next is people with modest assets. If you have $10 million to your name, you may not want to do a Medicaid trust. It's not because it's not useful. It may still be useful, but remember, it's locking up some of that money. And you're relying upon the fact that Medicaid is going to be providing the care as opposed to a paid home health care agency. And I'll be honest, typically if you're paying money out of pocket, you're going to get better care than a Medicaid caregiver is. I know people don't want to hear that, but it's true. So keep that in mind. Special features, again, is that only income is distributable to the creating individual. And this means that it leaves the remaining trust assets to whoever you want. The question that people get into is they ask, can I make changes? So I name my son and my daughter as trustees and beneficiaries eventually of this trust. And now my daughter pissed me off. She married somebody who has a lot of tattoos and, you know, still smokes cigarettes, God forbid. So at that point I say, I disapprove of my daughter, but this is an irrevocable trust. I had to put this in a trust. I'm not in control of it. What do I do? You can maintain in that trust the power of appointment. A power of appointment says, in my will, I get to change the beneficiary to this trust. So even though I can't change the trust, I can change the future beneficiary from my son and my daughter to, in this case, not happy with my daughter anymore. I could change it to just my son or a charity or, my grandkids. Otherwise, you're stuck with this trust the rest of your life, because to qualify for Medicaid benefits, like we said, most trusts are irrevocable. Now, again, this brings us to the question of what assets should I place in this trust? I know there's some financial planners on this webinar, so I had to up my game and think, all right, what kind of assets would you actually put into these trusts? Well, the typical thing that you place into a Medicaid asset protection trust is the house. So if I have a primary residence, I'm scared the nursing home is going to take that residence from me if I go to the nursing home. And you'd be right to be concerned. The good news is when you place a primary residence in an asset protection trust, there's no income to distribute. And you say, that seems weird. Why would you place a house in a trust that only distributes income? And the answer is that's the whole idea. You're getting a full protection. You don't need to distribute income, right? Because you live in the house. And if you maintain the right to live in the house, you also get a step up in cost basis at death. So these people who bought their house for $30,000 in Long Island and now it's worth $900,000, if you place it in a Medicaid trust, when you die, that gets a full step up in cost basis. There's no capital gains taxes due. Win, win, win. And you get to maintain the STAR exemption if you're an elderly individual and you're getting a tax break on your real estate taxes. So again, this is the asset that everyone wants to put in these Medicaid trusts. And I love to do it for you. In truth, all assets are welcome. So any investment can be used. What's an example? I had a client once with my former business partner. They owned a fractional interest in a parking garage company. All right. You want to talk about somewhat exotic? That's somewhat exotic. They were able to own that and still get the income from that every single year. That's a pretty good deal. That asset was still protected from Medicaid. The nursing home and Medicaid couldn't go after that asset because it was owned by the trust. Now, the good news is that you can place any asset in there. It does require a little bit of planning though, because if you need excess income, you need to figure out what kind of assets you're going to place in there. What if I have $500,000 in a brokerage account? You probably want to work with a financial planner to figure out how much income you want to generate. Because if a lot of income is being generated, you may want to distribute that to yourself, but it may hurt your Medicaid benefits because if you have too much income, you don't qualify for Medicaid. So again, just because you have this trust doesn't mean you don't ever have to work with a financial planner again. In fact, it probably makes working with them and your attorney a little bit more important. Which brings us to our next type of trust, the pooled income trust. Pooled income trust I like to refer to as a pizza. Why? Everyone gets the same flavor. All right, so if you're my friend, you're going to come, we're going to go out to dinner together and we're going to get a pizza and it's going to have pepperoni on it. And you say you want anchovies and I say, heck no, get away from my pizza. Not interested, you don't get a piece of my pizza. So the pooled income trust is going to be based on the same trust for everybody. It's a not-for-profit that just drafts one trust document and says, boop, if you want this pizza, this flavor, you're going to work with us. That's great. You can't make any changes. Now, just because it's the same flavor that everyone has does not mean every slice is the same. So I may have excess money. I may place more income into this pooled income trust. My slice of the pizza is bigger. I get more money out of this trust than you could conceivably. But the actual terms of it are the same. You say, I don't want a pepperoni pizza, I want anchovies. I say, you're crazy. Here, have this pizza my wife has. It's a different pooled income trust company. That's fine. You guys can have your anchovy pizza together, but again, the slice size may be different. And that's about the level of analogies and witty euphemisms I can come up with pizza. These are the pooled income trust parties. So you can still choose to create a trust. So you could say, I want to be, you don't really create it. The not-for-profit creates the trust, but you're the one who chooses which one to go into. So you say, all right, I decide this is good, or your power of attorney says, yep, this is the pooled income trust mom wants to use, and they'll place money in this trust. The trustee is the not-for-profit. Remember, the prior trust, the Medicaid Asset Protection Trust, that we're protecting the asset for our kids can be the trustee. But this is income. This isn't asset protection. This is income. We're saying we're trusting the not-for-profit in this case, to pay our bills, to be the trustee. Now, you are the beneficiary during your life. So any excess income that is created by you that goes into this pooled trust, they'll pay your bills. You send them your bills, they'll pay for them. The bad news is if you die and there's $8,000 left in the trust, unlike the Medicaid Asset Protection Trust, the not-for-profit gets any leftover money that's in the pooled income trust. So again, what is it? It's a trust that's created by a not-for-profit who is also the trustee. Now they'll accept your spend down, that amount of money you make over that $875 per month in income. So that could be excess Social Security or pension or even your required minimum distributions. The money goes into your bank account and automatically you sweep it out and you send it to this not-for-profit that runs the pooled income trust company. In New York, there are approximately 25 companies you get to choose. This is a decent choice. Now, the beneficiary or the power of attorney will send the bills to the not-for-profit, and the not-for-profit pays those bills. And what do those bills include? Rent? Yep. Utilities? Sounds good. Travel? Luxuries? Okay, no problem. Food? They'll pay for that. They will even pay for credit card payments, but they will not allow gifting of funds. If you try to take a cash advance on your credit card, they're going to say, nope, we're not going to pay for that. They're not going to pay for alcohol, tobacco, firearms, munitions. So there's certain things that they're not going to do. And it primarily is based around, we're not going to give you stuff that you can mess yourself up on. I don't know if I would want my great grandma having access to alcohol and munitions anyway, but they're also going to make sure that the bills are paid specifically for things that are covered by the pooled income trust. You never get that cash in your pocket. Now, what doesn't it pay for? There's the list. It's all the fun stuff that maybe isn't that fun when you reach that age anyway. Who usually uses them? This is people who have too much income who are ready to go on to Medicaid. Remember how I said there's a planning phase, which you do hopefully a few years before you get onto the Medicaid program during the implementation phase? You never set up a pooled income trust until you're ready to get onto Medicaid. So if your mom has dementia and she says, I have a few more good years ahead of me, no need to do the pooled income trust yet. We're only transferring assets. That's where the planning is. That's what we're trying to protect from the 1 month or 5-year look back. So income is the only thing that goes to the pooled income trust. And it's only the amount over that $875 income that I make every month. So if I make $1,875, I send that extra $1,000 to the pooled income trust company. They will pay my bills. And then I will qualify for Medicaid. The downside is the not-for-profit keeps the money every month, or not every month, but when you pass away. So if I only have that $1,000, spend $800, the next month I have an additional $200 plus the $1,000 I get. So I have $1,200 left for the next month to spend. It keeps rolling over until I die. So a lot of people will say, well, I should spend that down to, $10 left in there every month. And I say, go right ahead. That's the whole idea. So you always spend the money in the pooled income trust first before you start using any other monies you have, because if you die, it doesn't go to your choice of beneficiary. It goes to the not-for-profit. Now, what's the best asset to put into a pooled income trust? I got news for you. It's just money. It's your excess income. You say, well, I'd like for them to invest that. Don't worry, they will, in cash. Your pooled income trust needs to be liquid. Why? Because you're going to be spending the money that's in there every single month. You don't want leftover money in there. So what are they going to do? You think they're going to invest it in the stock market right now? That the market's down, good day for them to invest? No, it's only cash. That's all that's ever goes into and all that will ever be in your pooled income trust. There's no investment opportunity with a pooled income trust. Which brings us then to supplemental needs trusts, which you will also hear referred to as special needs trusts. These are trusts, again, created because either I need Medicaid benefits now, I have no ability to plan, like a Medicaid Asset Protection Trust, or someone is feeling generous and they want to leave money to me and I am a disabled individual. So again, there's first-party trusts and third-party trusts. And I think I've beaten this to death. A first-party trust is the beneficiary's money. So if I am the disabled individual and I'm trying to qualify for Medicaid, this is my money. And this can be created by me. Oh, I forgot to put me in here. This is actually, this slide is from a little while ago. Believe it, a few years ago, I couldn't create my own first party supplemental needs trust, but that's changed. So this slide's a little bit out of date. Kind of made it through. So it can be created with my help or the help of a parent, a grandparent, a court-appointed guardian, or a court order. So this is my money. A third-party trust is someone else's money. My parents, my grandparents, maybe even my spouse's, my best friend, guy who just likes me and puts it into his will or creates a separate trust for me. But it's never my money if it's a third-party SNT. It's a third party's money, all right? Here are the parties to a first-party supplemental needs trust. I create it. My parent or grandparent or court order or a guardian does. That's who creates the first-party trust. Who's the trustee? Anyone except me. It's basically anyone other than the Medicaid recipient. And the first beneficiary is me. When I die, any leftover money first pays back Medicaid, any bills that they have paid for me. And if there's any money left over, it goes to my heirs or next of kin. It's pretty rare it gets down to that third layer, all right? Usually, sometimes there's money left over in a first-party trust for Medicaid to get paid back. Usually, there's not a heck of a lot left over after that. So what is it? It's a trust that holds my excess assets. It can hold my excess income too, though usually it's going to be a pooled income trust that does that. Now, here's the thing. It requires government approval. So in New York City, that approval comes from the Human Resource Administration. Outside of the city, it comes from Department of Social Services. So this is a trust that says, Dan, you're trying to qualify for Medicaid. You need it now, but you have $200,000 to your name. I know you got into an accident. You need to give us a good reason why you think you're entitled to keep this money as opposed to spending that $200,000 first before you get onto Medicaid. Because remember, this is created. I had no planning phase. I just went right on the Medicaid. So I need to convince them this is a good idea. And they're usually relatively lenient. You just have to have a good trust. You're never going to create your own first-party supplemental needs trust. You're going to come to an attorney to do it. And it can hold assets from outside parties, but it doesn't make good sense to do that. So my mom could leave money to my first-party supplemental needs trust, but it's not a great idea, as you'll see, because like I said, you have to pay that money back to Medicaid when you die. She leaves it to a third-party trust. She gets to choose who gets it after I die. But if she leaves it to my trust, she's opening it up to my creditors when I pass away, being Medicaid. So this is usually used by disabled individuals who have too much income or assets. It's usually too much assets, and they are trying to qualify for Medicaid. Now, again, this is more. What are special features? You can name your own trustee. So unlike a pooled trust where you get to choose your not-for-profit, I can name my choice of trustee, provided the government approves of that person. Typically don't give you too much of a problem with that. Excess funds can be invested. Unlike a pooled income trust, this money can be invested in Bitcoin. It could be invested in stocks, bonds. It's good. Now, like I said, when I die, there is a payback that takes place. So if Medicaid has paid $200,000 in benefits to me and my trust is worth $300,000 when I die, Medicaid gets that first $200,000. And again, it requires Human Resource Administration or DSS to approve it, Department of Social Services. And they don't always like them. They would prefer you to do this in another way. So I've gotten approvals for supplemental needs trust for third parties, but it takes time. Court order is the best way to do it if you're applying that way. The best way to fund it, well, it's clearly with your money. And again, you can fund it with whatever asset you want. Now, again, the big caveat here is supplemental needs trust with my money. Remember, I can't take the money out. It's a third-party trustee. It's like my best friend. It's not like a pooled income trust. I name who the trustee is, but it can't be me. It can be invested in any way, but I can't get the cash distributed to me. So this is where you really need to work with a financial planner, because remember, I showed you all those cruddy tax rates for irrevocable trusts. You can't distribute this money to you. You can't have your money given back to you paid at your income tax rate, right? So you're stuck paying those horrible income tax rates for irrevocable trusts. These are the types of trusts where, and I know I speak a lot about working with financial planners. I don't think anyone doubts that I support financial planners. I'm a certified financial planner myself. Not saying it for that reason. I'm saying because this is some complicated stuff here. So if you're disabled or you have a disabled family member who has their own money in a first-party supplemental needs trust, you've got to balance how long this money is going to last with the taxation, the right person who's going to be paying the bills, et cetera, et cetera. So first-party supplemental needs trusts require both a good choice of trustee and a good financial planner, and frankly, not a half-bad accountant. You know, it's not so difficult for an accountant to create an irrevocable trust tax return, but this isn't something that they do every day. Last but not least is mom wants to leave her disabled son, me, money. What does she do? She can leave it to a third-party supplemental needs trust. Now, again, I'm not creating this. It's not my money. It's my mom, or it's my grandparent, or it's my best friend, it's my spouse, anyone other than the Medicaid recipient. The trustee can be anyone other than me. Heck, I don't think my spouse is a good choice if I'm the disabled individual, but you can name just about anyone other than the Medicaid recipient. During the beneficiary's life, the Medicaid recipient's life, they're the beneficiary. But here's the difference with the first-party supplemental needs trust. Look at the beneficiary after I die. It's whoever the creator of the trust wants to leave the money to. Why? Because unlike a first-party trust where the money first hit my pocket and then I place it into a trust, this is my mom's money. It never touches my pocket. It's never legally mine. So she can say when I die, there's no payback to Medicaid. This goes to whoever she wants to go to, my brother and sister, my nephew, the Hump Water Buffalo Foundation, her favorite charity. So it's a supplemental needs trust that's created only with a non-beneficiary's money. This is why it's called a third-party trust. It's third-party money. It's never my money. So there's no payback to Medicaid. Who usually uses them? People who love me enough to leave me money but don't want me kicked off of Medicaid. So if my mom left me $300,000 and she leaves it to me, I get kicked off Medicaid. I can only have $15,750. But if she leaves it in this trust, it's not included in my assets. Why? It's never legally mine. And again, special features, it can be created by anyone other than me. Can be created by a will as a testamentary trust, or it can be created separately as an inter vivos trust. It can be its own document. It's not inter vivios, it's inter vivos. Sorry about that typo. Leftover money goes to the creator's choice of beneficiary. It's typically, if I'm the disabled individuals, either my kid or my siblings, it's someone that my parents would want to leave it to, or my grandparents. Now, the creator may allow the trustee to bust the trust. So if I get better, and my mom has named my brother to be my trustee of my supplemental needs trust, and he says, you know what, Dan got better. Lo and behold, there was something in the secret sauce. It made me better. My brother may have the right to bust the trust if he's the trustee. I can't do it, but he can. So that's the good news. Now, the last question is the best way to fund it. It's only with other people's money. I can't put my money in there. Because I can't put my money in there, it gets to get several benefits, including the fact that the funds go to whoever the creator wants it to go to when I die. Now, the best assets are probably ones that don't generate large income tax liability, because again, I can't receive the money from the trust. Unlike an income-only trust, which is created with my money and then I take it out. And unlike a first-party supplemental needs trust where I'm not entitled to the income no matter what, here I'm also not entitled to the income, so it's absolutely taxed at those irrevocable trust rates. So municipal bonds tend to be a good choice if income is needed to continue the growth of the trust, not income in my pocket, just to have liquidity in the trust. I would suggest, again, minimum dividend stocks because, again, you're going to pay high income taxes. Capital gains taxes, doesn't really matter whether it's revocable or irrevocable trust or any other type of trust. The good news is this: if you have a disabled family member, you can buy it says a home. It could be an apartment, it could be a house, it could be anything within the trust. The only downside is you usually can't buy a co-op, but that's another program. But this is what a lot of parents or grandparents will do for their disabled grandchild if something happens. They'll have the home owned by the trust so that when I die, the leftover money goes to my remaining family members. And last but not least, here is your crib sheet. Again, go back to this at some later date. I would love to go into it in a little bit more depth, but we're a few minutes over. So I want to open it up to questions. I will leave the trust comparison up. This is our last slide other than the thank you slide. So this is people's opportunity to ask questions and answers. And I have a few here. This is the time to open it up. Irene C has a question. What happens to a first-party supplemental needs trust if it's not properly accounted for? How can it be rehabilitated or reestablished? Well, the problem is a first-party supplemental needs trust, if it's not properly accounted for, it means you haven't been filing income taxes. So it's kind of like, how do you rehabilitate that? You contact the IRS and you say, hey, we owe you money. You say, what if it's not compliant with Medicaid? Well, that's something we should talk about offline, because that isn't the, it's not a question I really would like to answer here on this webinar. I have the next question from Irene C. If funding a trustee for a first-party supplemental needs trust is troublesome, what options are there? If finding, I'm guessing, is what we're saying here. So if you have trouble finding a first party to act as your trustee, as your supplemental needs trust, what do? Well, you have choices. Banks will act, and often do, as trustees of trusts for people who can't find a trustee. They tend to charge a decent penny for it. It tends to be more than the average person would charge, so keep that in mind. You could ask an accountant to do it, or you could ask an attorney or a friend to do it. So finding a trustee shouldn't be that difficult. You always have the ability to name outside parties. They just may charge a little bit more than you would like them to. If there are any other questions, I will gladly answer them. Otherwise, I will bring us to our final slide of the day. Whoops, that's not it. That's the penultimate. There you go. There's our final slide. So again, if you have questions or comments, I always ask you to reach out to me. This is some complicated stuff, and I would have loved to have put it in a simpler way, and it's just not very easy to do that with these types of concepts. If you do have questions or comments, I want you to reach out to me directly. Remember, October 1st is a drop-dead date. It's an important time for you to do planning before. So if you do have questions, ask them. I have a very last question we'll give to Yulia S. Can credit card balances be paid by first-party supplemental needs trusts, including charitable contributions? Charitable contributions? No, 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 not good, not good. Credit card balances can be, because again, if you're on Medicaid, Medicaid gets to look them over. If it sees a cash advance, it's going to be bad. Remember, when you're qualifying for Medicaid, you have to show them your assets. And then when you re-qualify every year, you have to send them your statements. And if they see you taking out a whole bunch of cash or receiving cash advances from credit cards, they're gonna criticize it. Charities are also not considered essential. I will say with pooled income trusts, I believe you can give $50 a year. It's some ridiculously low amount of money you can give as a gift. So it's not like you can give $5,000 bucks. It's de minimis amount of money. I'm going to cut it off there. It's been a pleasure speaking with all of you. If you have any further questions, please talk to me offline. Again, thank you for your time. I look forward to you guys coming back for another webinar in the near future.